Hello, I'm Tamara Rosevan. Welcome to the program. The first ever face-to-face meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin is dominating this year's G20 summit in Germany. Of course, the current situation in eastern Ukraine is high on their agenda. There's huge speculation and discussion about what was really said behind closed doors. But what consequences could this meeting have for Ukraine? Joining us is Victoria Wojcicka, a Ukrainian member of parliament. Welcome.
Thank you, Tamara. Good to be here today.
So, to start things off, obviously there's very limited information coming out about the meeting, what was discussed. Supposedly, only 6 members of different governments were in the room. Rex Tillerson, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. So, what would be the Ukrainian government strategy in whatever comes, whatever statements do come out from that meeting?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand whether there is any real strategy and message conveyed through the President Poroshenko at the meeting with Trump back in Washington, especially in respect to the war in eastern Ukraine and in respect to Crimea. As we have to remember, it's 2 combined issues that are of the highest importance for Ukraine. And indeed, we are not yet member of G20. We're not there, so unfortunately we cannot use that opportunity, but we hope that our position, our view would be communicated and addressed properly at that meeting. What that can be absolutely should be the question of getting rid of heavy weaponry from the eastern part of Ukraine. It's the question of demilitarization of the occupied territory. It's the issue of how to deal and what's the plan of returning back Crimea back to Ukraine. So there are lots of issues. However, we do understand that we're living in the bigger world, and we are, fortunately or unfortunately, a part of a bigger issue, or I would say a package at stake, including Syria, Middle East, overall situation in Europe and the United States, and Ukraine is indeed still part of that conundrum to be solved.
Now you just talked about kind of Ukraine's grander strategy, and Ukraine is part of a global community. Recently, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko visited Washington. Now, what was your response? What was your take of the trip? Do you think it was relatively successful?
First of all, it was a success because it happened. And it's great that the leaders of 2 nations met and had an opportunity to exchange their concerns and their thoughts. For me personally, very important was to see that one of 3 top issues that were discussed at that meeting was the fight with the corruption. And indeed, we are still a state that is at the very beginning of its revolution, its fight with the enemy inside. We have the outside enemy, which is Russia, the occupier, but we also have a greater challenge here inside, and we have to deal with that. So indeed, to sum up, it was a great news that the meeting did take place. What I expected that the outcome of that meeting would be a joint vision of what steps need to be taken to demilitarize, to free Ukrainian land, to deal with Russia. We haven't seen any clear statements on that. We all understand that Minsk agreement is not working. It's dead. We see so many lives being lost at the war zone on a daily basis.
But do you see that there could be an alternative to the Minsk agreement? Oh,
definitely. First of all, we expect that the United States will play a more active role. And it will not be just a role of advisor, but of an active participant in dealing with those issues. And we've seen historically, like in, for example, Croatia, there were Minsk 1, 2, 3 14, 15, like the agreements that we had. And only when the United States decided to actively participate in the negotiations that were around the situation that was happening in Croatia, the progress started to be seen.
Things started to take off, basically,
yes.
and people saw a bit of progress. But so, how do you see the upcoming visit of U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson? He is meant to come this weekend, and a defense deal, which has been highly regarded within the Ukrainian community and Ukrainian diaspora abroad, and this is what Ukraine has wanted from the start. How do you see it playing out, and how actually successful do you see being this new defense deal?
Well, first and foremost, I expect that the visit will be a follow-up of the visit of today's meeting and tomorrow's continuation of G20 meetings.
So you think it's Putin's and Trump's meeting is going to have some kind of effect on Rex Tillerson coming to Ukraine and with
I think
the
his
new defense
agenda and the messages that Mr. Secretary will bring to Ukraine will very much depend on the negotiations and talks that are happening at G20 summit.
So essentially, it will have an effect, the meeting behind closed doors between Putin and Trump. But what do you think? How do you think the Ukrainian government should react if, say, if somehow you know, it's been said before that Russia's intervention in Syria and Ukraine could be potentially used as a bargaining chip, yes, basically. And how would the Ukrainian government react if this is somehow happens, basically?
Well, it is really sad that we are still just the object of the discussion. We are not part of the discussion. We are not imposing our agenda and our strategy, indeed. And first and foremost would be the objective would be to analyze the recommendations, because it can be only recommendations that could be brought to Ukraine on how to tackle certain issues. And the position of the government will very much depend on whether the proposed solutions, if such are brought to the attention of the Ukrainian government, will suit best Ukrainian people and Ukraine as a country, and whether they will reflect our vision as to how to solve the conflict. Actually, it's the war, how to end it, how to return the occupied territories, both Crimea and Eastern Ukraine. So it will very much depend on what will be brought to the table. However, we have to do our homework here in Ukraine ourselves, strengthen our institutions, truly fight with the corruption, make our army stronger. And the defense weaponry, the subject that we just brought, is indeed could be a great help for Ukraine to defend our territory. That can be part of the solution as well.
Now, you've just mentioned, before you've mentioned, you know, internal struggle that Ukraine has had to face, which is corruption. And this week, Boris Johnson, the UK's Home Secretary, he had some words of encouragement about Ukraine during a conference that Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman was at in London. That's right. And he said that Ukraine has had astounding success, but more needs to be done. Now, is the Ukrainian government and more of your party as well, and what other members of parliament think, are they a bit tired of hearing, from their Western partners how Ukraine's doing so well, but still more needs to be done? How much more? Is there incentive to do more in parliament as well, to pass tough reforms such as the pension reform and so on?
Pension reform, medical reform, and most importantly, we have to complete the anti-corruption reform. The judicial system is one of the most corrupted in Ukraine as an institution, and we are urging the parliament to support the idea of creating independent anti-corruption court that will not be dependent on the president, the government, the parliament completely independent, and the selection process should be such that would involve also, by the way, international donors, countries, those countries that support Ukraine in selection process.
Right.
So whether there is enough stamina or will to push for such reforms, unfortunately, we had the very high spike of supportive reforms for the first year and a half. Now we see the downsliding tendency, unfortunately. And the push from our partners, from international partners, is very important, because they are supporting not just the government, but the people of Ukraine who really want to change Ukraine.
Just to reiterate, so Ukrainian Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman actually promised that by the summer, by the end of the summer, I guess, the anti-corruption courts will be created.
It cannot be done.
You don't think it could be done?
No, it cannot be done from technical point of view, because first we need to adopt the law. And we have only one plenary session week left next week, and it's fully occupied, and there are lots of issues that will be discussed and put for the voting. And the Anti-Corruption Court, unfortunately, according to the agenda that was just recently 5 minutes ago released, I looked at it and it's not there. So Vladimir Groysman, he can't promise what he want to see, but it's up to the parliament to actually do the work and deliver.
So basically, it's up to the individual parliamentarians to work together to bring this into force. Now, coming back to the G20. How confident are you? How confident are the Ukrainian government in that the G20 will be successful? That the talks, that Ukraine will be, when Ukraine will be on the agenda, that this will have a benefit for Ukraine, that these talks will bring results?
Well, I'm looking at it from the perspective not of the government, but just as a ordinary person, Ukrainian. I've looked at the speech that the President Trump gave yesterday, and he used quite strong words when it comes to Russia and stop supporting the war in eastern Ukraine. And that was a quite strong signal. And I hope that it was just the first sign that the United States, they remain our partners, one of the biggest partner in the world, and they will continue supporting us as an independent state. And it's in their interest of the United States to have peace in this part of the world, to end the war, and make sure that Ukraine is a prosperous country, and that all the conflicts that emerged during the last couple of years, they're resolved. It's for the benefit of everyone. It's for the benefit of Europe. It's for the benefit of the United States. So I hope there is a bigger idea of a peaceful Europe that is in the mind of the leaders of G20, and they will therefore communicate their agenda and put together the agenda and communicate it this way. So let's hope for the best.
Let's do hope for the best. Very optimistic. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me, Tamara.
So we've been joined by Victoria Wojcicka. She's a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, and you're watching UATV.